Hi everyone. So the point of this lesson 1.03 is to practice different shading and drawing techniques with your pencil or whatever supplies you have available. It isn't limited to a pencil. You'll see later at the end that unfortunately my pencil that I was currently using here broke, so I had to switch out to another one. But again, whatever supplies or materials you have available, you can use, even a pen. The first technique I am using here is just general shading. You can see, well, I guess you can't see the pressure that I'm putting on, but if you press down on the pencil harder, you can see that the lines get darker, and the less pressure you're applying to the pencil or drawing device, the lighter it'll be. Next, I'm demonstrating hatching, where you just use single lines and you can play around with the pressure. Like you can see on the left side, I wasn't pressing very hard, and then I was pressing harder where the lines are darker. Another way to give the illusion of something lighter or darker is to space out the lines. Next is cross hatching. If you didn't already think about the name of it, it is hatching plus adding lines that cross it, hence the name cross hatching. So you can see, again, this is very basic, but ultimately the more lines that you add that cross in a different direction, it will create a look of something darker. So if you want a darker value, you'll add more lines and more layers of lines going in different directions. And the next and final technique is smudging. So you can see that I'm just doing some basic shading, playing with the pressure to make it darker and lighter. And then after I have that, I'm going to take a paper towel. You could use your finger. It's a little messy for my liking, so I just had some paper towel lying around and ultimately just literally smudged it with my finger, giving it a more blended smudge look. You could also use a tissue. There are actual blending tools that you can get for this specifically. But again, you can just simply use whatever you have available, paper towel, or even another piece of paper if you don't have paper towel or tissue available. Now for the second part of this project, you need to practice drawing a sphere, a cone, and a cylinder. I just kind of sectioned off part of it in my sketchbook just to make it easier for me and labeled it so that I know for my own reference which one I'm drawing, just like I did with the different techniques so that I had a reference. So you want to draw as a circle as best you can. Obviously mine is not perfect, so again, this is just practice, so just do the best you can. The whole point of this is learning how to create value in different shading techniques ultimately. So again, if it's not perfect, don't worry about it. As long as you meet the rubric requirements, you'll be fine. So I did create some center lines that I'll end up erasing just to give myself a reference, because it is a sphere, which is a three-dimensional circle, or the form version of a circle. So I am just kind of doing very light sketch lines. Again, this is going to be completely up to your drawing style and what works for you. You can go right in and shade this with shading, hatching, cross-hatching, smudging, whatever you want. You can make multiple ones of them. Try different techniques, see what you prefer and what's easiest for you. Another part of this lesson is learning about a light source. So you can see, I pretty much left the left side of this sphere white for the most part and just put a few lines to give a little bit of an indication of value, and it's slowly getting darker. So I just kept adding layers of the pencil, as you can see, and again, you can use any techniques you want. I think I ultimately ended up doing some shading, just adding a few lines here and there. It is always easier to go darker and add more color or graphite or whatever medium you're working with. I mean, you can go lighter, but I encourage you to err on the side of caution and try to, put less pressure and just work on building up the intensity of the darkness. And as you keep adding, remember where your light source is coming from, and a light source is ultimately, the way I'm drawing this, you could pretend that either like the sun, or I have a lamp to the left of my sphere, so hence that is the lightest area, and then we're assuming there is no other light source behind it, so that's why it's darker, and that's why the shadow will be on the right side. And when you're trying to make something look three-dimensional, as in real life, things always have a shadow, and the shadow is always on the opposite side of the light source. So my shadow is going to be kind of leaning towards the right. I decided to try using cross-hatching here, again, just to experiment with it. I kind of lightly just shaded out and sketched out the area I want the shadow to be. And then I kind of worked my way up with different layers of cross-hatching here, with more layers of lines closer to the sphere, because the closer it is to the object, the darker it is. The further away it gets from the object, the lighter it gets. So you can see here. And then I guess I took my paper towel and just kind of tried some smudging over the cross-hatching to give it that more blurred look. While I was doing this, I forgot that we were going to be doing both a cone and a cylinder, so I erased my line and re-sectioned it out. I had a smaller workspace to work with, but you know, whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to work on a larger space is generally easier, or work on a smaller space. And then I gave myself some kind of guidelines or sketch lines for the base of both the cone as well as the cylinder. And then the cone comes to a point at the top, so I just put a little reference line, eyeballing where the middle would be and where the 2 points will meet. And then the cylinder, 2 sides or reference lines for the sides, and the same kind of, I guess, oval shape thing at the top, because again, it's a cylinder, not a cone. And then I did try to lightly erase my guidelines, because now I am ready to start shading. So if you do have to think about it a little bit. It's three-dimensional, so we're not going to see the back lines or that center line. Again, those were just reference points. And then I did the same technique and steps as I did with the sphere. So, I mean, I guess you can't even really see it from here, but lightly just starting out adding some lines to add some shading and value and depth to both the cone and the cylinder. And I do like to try to, when I'm doing that technique of just adding lines, to try to give it a slight curve, because again, you know, a cone and a cylinder, they are three-dimensional shapes or forms, and they are rounded. So if you think about where the light source is coming from, like on the left, any shadows or anything would be rounded. So if you are doing this technique of shading and doing straight lines, it does look a little bit more realistic if you try to stay with the shape of the form or whatever object you're working with. So I continued this same process of shading and just adding more gradual layers to make the right side of the cylinder darker. Same with the cone, and you know, again, same process that I did with the sphere. If you wanted to, you could choose 3 different shading techniques and devote that to each one of the 3, like the sphere and the cone and the cylinder. One could be shading, one could be hatching, one could be smudging. It's really up to you. Again, this is a practice exercise, so it's just trying to make you become comfortable and familiar with the different techniques that you can add value. And then again, same concept as adding the shadows to both the cone and the cylinder. You can use whatever kind of value adding technique that you want to try. And these are the 2 different exercises that you do need to turn in for 1.03, as well as the third part where you have to draw, I think it's at least 3 different forms with shading with at least one of the techniques, and they do have to be overlapping as well. You can see those example photos in the lesson. I'm not going to demonstrate that in here, because hopefully you got the idea of how to do these techniques from here, and this is your time to get creative and you know, create some nice artwork with the new techniques that you learned. So hopefully this helped you, and I will see you for the next one.